Welcome to More Than Just a Veteran. We recently announced an exciting new chapter for More Than Just a Veteran. Effective September 1st, 2025, we will be moving and merging our channel to Where History Roams. We've had the honor and the privilege the past 4 years to honor our men in service or women, as well as provide you some really interesting military history. As a proud graduate student studying military history at the Citadel Military College, our new channel will be expanding beyond military history, including, but not limited to, classes offered in World War II topics. As we close this chapter and move to Where History Roams, I need your support. Please come subscribe and like the channel so you'll get those notifications every time we drop a new history episode. I want to personally thank all the veterans and their families for allowing me to highlight your stories, as well as all those who supported the More Than Just a Veteran podcast. And now I bring to you our final episode number 10 on the Sultana Disaster Museum. And remember that freedom is not free. This is More Than Just a Veteran, signing out. Welcome to our brand new channel. I'm Kat Bell, graduate student from the Citadel Military College, specializing in World War II history. Are you a historian, author, or an expert with a story to share? Where History Roams is seeking guests for our upcoming episodes. If you specialize in a specific era of history and are interested in being featured, please reach out to us. We'd love to learn about your area of expertise and explore the possibility of featuring you on the show. Email us, wherehistoryroams@gmail.com. Let us know in the comments what historical topics you'd like to see covered, and feel free to share your own expertise. We look forward to hearing from you. I've never been anywhere history is not. And a very happy Labor Day to you and yours.
The Sultana is a story of needless tragedy and the greed and corruption that led to it. But it's also a story of bravery and sacrifice. The Sultana is the deadliest maritime disaster in American history, yet it's probably a story you've not been told.
The Sultana was a Mississippi steamboat that had a charter by the federal government to bring home Union prisoners of war, and the government was paying the captain per soldier. The legal capacity of the Sultana was 376 people.
At Vicksburg, through a chain of bribes, the captain had almost 2,000 recently released Union soldiers squeezed onto the boat.
Most of them were starving and weak from months of being wasted in Confederate prisons. Among those on board was one John Clark Ely, a volunteer from Ohio.
John Clark Ely was captured near Nashville on December 5th, 1864. And on Christmas Day, as he was being taken towards Andersonville, he wrote in his diary, "Will another Christmas find us among family and friends again?" John Clark Ely and 2,000 of his comrades were placed on the Sultana, which he described as a large but not very fine steamboat.
The Sultana left the wharf at Vicksburg and headed upstream. At Helena, it docked to pick up a few passengers, and here photographer Thomas W. Banks showed us what the Sultana looked like as she made her way upriver.
John Clark Ely wrote in his diary that day, "Oh, a very fine day, upward still we go." The Sultana docked at Memphis at 6 p.m. and stayed there until midnight, and then steamed northward on the flooded Mississippi River.
When the Sultana was about 7 miles north of Memphis, at 2 in the morning on April 27, 1865, her boilers exploded.
Hundreds of men were killed instantly by the superheated steam, the shrapnel from the exploding boilers, and within a few minutes, the entire superstructure was on fire.
Initially, there was a mad rush to get off the boat, but once these guys on the bow realized that the flames are going to the rear, they sort of stopped. But then what happens is one of the paddle wheel housing will burn away and it starts to turn the boat. When the boat turns, the flames are now blown towards them. And now you have a second mad panic off of the bow. And this is where you have a second mass drowning of guys grabbing each other, and almost hundreds going down at one time.
When the sun rose that morning, over 1,200 people were dead or dying.
As a point of reference, the USS Arizona, when it was attacked on December 7th, 1941 by the Japanese, lost about 1,200 men also. Everybody remembers Pearl Harbor and remembers the Arizona, but how many remember the Sultana?
John Clark Ely never made it home. Along with the hundreds of men that were recovered, lie buried in graves that simply state, unknown U.S. soldier. The men on the Sultana are men that deserve to be recognized, to be remembered by a country that they fought to preserve.
Our project is to create a permanent Sultana Disaster Museum that's worthy of the significance of this event, because we believe this story needs to be told now more than ever.
We really need a Sultana Disaster Museum to remember the Sultana disaster. The men, the women, the children, the crew.
I had a relative that was on board who was the president of the Survivors Association. I didn't know about it. I knew of Andersonville, but not the Sultana. We can't lose that history.
In the little bitty museum that we've had visitors from all 50 states and 14 foreign countries. We know that with a large museum built to national standards, about 50,000 visitors would visit the museum every year.
We want them to get lunch, dinner, cup of coffee. We want them to shop, and that money gets spent in our community and stays in our community. And we feel that there will be 140 jobs that will be created either directly or indirectly by the museum. The Sultana Historical Disaster Museum is forecasted to open at the end of 2023. The cost of renovation and exhibit construction is just under $10 million. Our capital campaign is $14 million. That additional $4 million above the renovation will be used for advertising and promotion, a signature film, as well as an endowment for operating expenses while the museum grows in popularity. As economic development, this can be equal to a car manufacturing plant or a steel mill, but the bottom line is there will be money that comes into our community that's not here now. There will be people that will be coming into our community that are not here now, and our people that live here will benefit from that.
This is the best project for this region right now. So the state has to be a part of this. We've got to put money to it. We're going to benefit from it. We're going to be the biggest beneficiary of this project.
The City of Helena, West Helena, and I personally are committed to helping raise the money for this group. I think we owe it to the victims and their families who were denied a monument. I think we owe it to the survivors who were denied a pension. I think we owe it to ourselves today to remind us of where we once were in our country and where we could be again.
We study our history to learn from our past and not repeat its mistakes. But we've not told this story the way it deserves to be told. This is our opportunity, our chance to change that, and we need your help. To everyone.
Hey everyone, I am standing outside the Sultana Disaster Museum. The Sultana was a big steamboat during the Civil War that went down and had close to 2,000 prisoners of war on it. So this is going to be a fun little trip. So we're in Marion, Arkansas, so let's go on inside.
At the Sultana, was a Mississippi River steamboat that sank and burned on April the 27th of 1865, generally down the road here in an area that is now known as Mound City, Arkansas. It is the deadliest maritime disaster in the United States history because of the number of lives that was lost in about 5 hours' time. This tends to be an overwhelming story because of so much detail, so many people involved here. I hear that from many of our visitors as they're leaving, overwhelming in a good way. And also the fact that they have lived this long and they've never known of this story. So there are reasons why it is an unknown story that I'd like to share with you right now. Just a few. The timeline had a lot to do with why this was pushed back into the shadows of time. So just to revisit what was happening in April of 1865 that did push this out of the headlines. On April the 9th, you had the surrender of General Lee to General Grant at Appomattox. So the unfolding of our 4-year Civil War is coming to an end. That was huge news. Huge news. On the 14th, our nation's president is assassinated, Abraham Lincoln, and of course passes away the next day. A lot of people don't realize the media attention that the presidential funeral train was getting at this time as it goes from Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois for his final resting place. That was capturing major headlines because embalming was so new. It had been invented during the Civil War. Most people had not ever seen an embalmed body before, much less a president. So he stopped at several northern cities along the way for open viewing casket visitation. Huge crowds were gathering. They all wanted to know what he looked like as he traveled. By the way, he looked very, very good, but that is another rabbit hole we could go down. But that is why it was covering a lot, or certainly gaining a lot of attention. During that time, they were searching for his assassinator. So the night before the Sultana explosion is when they capture and kill John Wilkes Booth. I get that reaction a lot. There were thousands of steamboat collisions, explosions, wrecks along the Mississippi River during this particular time. But what makes this one so unique is the fact that it was overloaded with over 1,900 soldiers that had recently been released from the Confederate prison camps of Cahaba and Andersonville. And they were simply headed home after the war, boarded in Vicksburg. They were headed up to Camp Chase in Cairo, Illinois. So that is just a little bit about why this story tended to escape the history books as well as the headlines. I have also been very fortunate to meet so many descendants of these people. I had 27 last year. I think I'm on 8 or 9 this year. Most of them come in and they know nothing about the Sultana story until they started doing their genealogy. These guys went home and simply didn't mention it. They did not talk about their battle experiences. They did not talk about the harsh treatments in these prison camps. They did not talk about the horrific scenes they saw when this steamboat exploded. So that's another reason why it just kind of faded away. However, I do want to introduce you to one survivor here. This is Reverend Chester Berry, and he is certainly significant to us telling this story. He survived. Just as many of these survivors went home and never mentioned this particular event again, apparently he found it therapeutic because he went to the Sultana Association meetings and he interviewed 133 people and asked them to tell him the story of what it was like to survive this horrific event. He publishes that book in 1892, and that's all it is their stories.
Wow, amazing.
That is our biggest primary source. And so when I mentioned that I wanted to tell you stories, it's their stories that we tell. So a little bit about the last journey of the Sultana as I go over your little geography lesson here, since you're not from around here. So even before General Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox, the federal government had hired this group of steamboats to help transport these guys up the Mississippi River to Camp Chase. these prison camps were just death camps, and they decided that this was a necessary thing to do to transport these guys, help them get mustered out. So Captain Mason and his Sultana starts his journey on the 13th in St. Louis and comes all the way down. When he approaches Vicksburg, Mississippi on the way down, is when he meets Quartermaster Reuben Hatch, who is a chapter in our whole big story here, but let me just sum him up at this point and say he had already been found guilty of falsifying documents, pocketing federal money, just to name a few things. So he comes up with another deal to make some money, and he approaches Captain Mason with the deal he could not refuse. And he promised him a full boatload of soldiers if he would give him a kickback of some of the money the federal government was going to pay him. So Captain Mason does agree, but he does have to go down to New Orleans first, pick up 70 civilian paying passengers, and over 100 of these. And these are called hogsheads. And they are loaded with sugar.
A hogshead was a specific type of large barrel or cask. By law in colonial times, these barrels were standardized, but the size could vary. They were used for shipping and storing various goods, especially tobacco, which was a major cash crop in the South. A hogshead of tobacco could weigh over 1,000 pounds. These barrels were also used for sugar, molasses, salted pork, fish, and other goods.
One of these would weigh 1,200 pounds.
Wow.
So not only is this overloaded with passengers, we have a lot of heavy cargo on board. So up the Mississippi River he goes, headed towards Vicksburg first. Now, just a little note about the Mississippi River. The further south you are, the more challenging it was for these steamboats to chug upriver. These further south, it was flooded, and we are at flood stage on April the 27th because the river was almost 4 miles wide. With the flooded river, you get heavy mud, sediment that gets in your paddle wheels, trees, limbs, other debris that would be in the Mississippi River. So it's quite challenging going upriver anyway. But he does. He reaches Vicksburg, but before he gets to Vicksburg, he does realize that one of the boilers has a leak in it. Very common for steamboat boilers during this time. But he chooses to patch it versus waiting 3 days for a total replacement.
Oh, okay.
So he patches it, and it's on the 24th of April when over 1,900 of these soldiers headed home aboard the Sultana. So up the flooded river they go. On the 26th is when they arrive in Helena, Arkansas, which is where a famous photograph is taken. And I want you to take a second to appreciate that, because they were docked in Helena for about an hour. And there happened to be a camera in town. So that's priceless, right? We, of course...
We have a visitor. She likes to be with her mama.
That's fine. So we, of course, have blown it up for research purposes. So let me point out a couple of things that we know of. This is a horse's head.
Oh, yeah.
There are 70 or close to 100 horses and mules on board that belong to the federal government.
Oh.
Headed upriver. This is the pilot house, and we believe that to be Captain Mason up there.
Oh, okay.
Now, the passengers also see the camera, so they come over to the port side, and that is why you see it leaning. Now, this causes Captain Mason a lot of concern. He's up there. He sees it leaning. I'm sure he also realizes that smoke is coming out of one side. That is an indication that your boiler is somewhat stressed because it's not even. So we know from one of the primary sources that he's yelling at them to trim ship. Trim ship. That means get back and level it off. So this is priceless. Town Memphis, they get there about 6 p.m. same day. Unload these hogsheads, about 100 of them, 97 boxes of wine, 60 fat hogs, amongst other things, I'm sure. And they are there for about 6 hours. Around midnight, they leave Memphis, and 7 miles north of Memphis, the Sultana finally explodes. Now, our leading researcher, Gene Seliker, that you will see in the video, has confirmed 2,130 passengers on board. Legal registered capacity for her was 376. Now, it was common for steamboat captains to be lenient with their capacity numbers during that time if they were transporting soldiers or provisions for the war effort, but this wasn't extreme. He has also confirmed that in just a matter of hours, we had 1,167 deaths occurred. And of that number, 1,047 were the soldiers headed home to Cairo, Illinois, to be mustered out. Had lived in Memphis his whole life, did not know the story, and becomes obsessed with it. He is still learning about it today, still researching it, still writing it. Now, he published this book in 1992 without the use of the internet. He actually traveled to the National Archives to get his information to publish this in 1992. Gene Seliker is from the Chicago, Illinois area. In the mid-1980s, I believe it was, he first learned of the Sultana story, becomes obsessed with it as well. This is his second book to the Sultana.
Oh, wow.
First one was published in 1996. This one was published 3 years ago, April of 2022. More information had come forward. That's why he saw the need to publish his second one. We get new information still all the time.
Wow.
As people uncover letters or information about, that box that everybody has that you can't throw it away, but you don't know what it is. And as people are learning of their story, they're producing letters, and we're reading those letters and getting more information, such as what they were issued at Camp Fisk, what they might have eaten at Camp Fisk. It's ongoing.
Wonderful.
Most of the artifacts in here belong to Gene's private collection that he's collected for over 30 years.
Wow.
Just a few while you're seated here. The flags, the ribbons over on the wall. Those ribbons came from the Sultana Survivors Association, 1913, 1915, 1993, 1907. So a little bit about their organization. About 20 years after the explosion, the survivors decided they wanted to form this association, and they wanted to have reunions. And they would meet once a year, certainly to meet their old comrades, but they also felt like they deserved a pension. And they also wanted a national monument to the Sultana. Now, both of those requests were denied a couple of times, but they kept their organization together. And eventually, many of them received their pensions, and I have a copy of a pension letter in the next room, as well as the National Monument, which goes up in Knoxville, Tennessee, in Mount Olive Cemetery in 1916. So this place is full of stories. I could go on and on and on and on. Rescue section over here in the corner. There's some stories there about rescue efforts that were done. And of course, we have the wall here, the over 1,900 Union soldiers with a little information about them, whether they lived or died, hospital that they were sent to, of course, which state they were from. And then we have the list of passengers here. And the 58th Ohio Regiment that was there. So the center deck here, the middle deck, was where the paying passengers were, and the soldiers were not allowed to congregate in that area because they paid for the view. That is why you see them so crowded, congested, and all the other areas. Tall smokestacks indicate that it was designed to be a cotton cargo steamboat. So you wanted the really tall smokestacks so fire and embers don't come out of the top and catch your cargo on fire. The crew members, this is their cabins up here, and then of course Captain Mason's pilot house is on the top. The flag was flying half-mast at the bow of the boat for Lincoln's assassination. Captain Mason is credited with delivering newspapers to the southern port cities about the assassinations, so that was huge news. So real quick, of course I could go on and on, but I do want to point out a couple of prison camp stories. There's not a lot of reading on this wall, but there's certainly a lot of stories. To me personally, this is a point in our big story that I like to put emphasis on, because they were not just normal passengers. They had been released from these prison camps and they were simply headed home. They were from Cahaba and Andersonville. And Cahaba came first, and it was just a cotton warehouse located close to Selma, Alabama. It would hold about 500 or 600 prisoners, but at one point there's over 3,000 that are crammed in there. It's also located on the Cahaba and the Alabama River, which would overflow. People like, I believe his name is Otto Bardock, he remembered standing in waist deep water until those rivers receded. So that's one of the types of situations they were involved in these prison camps. Something special about Cahaba, they tended to be in better shape if they were coming from Cahaba versus coming from Andersonville. They had a captain who was a Methodist minister who was quite sympathetic towards his prisoners and actually managed to get them more provisions as he ran out. So something spectacular that he did, he actually wrote a letter to the federal government asking or begging for help in September of 1864. To his surprise, on December the 24th, 1864, these steamboats of mercy came down these rivers here with delivering 2,000 pair of pants, 2,000 shirts, 4,000 pair of socks, other provisions for these prisoners. It's unheard of. Many stories have been written about him from the survivors of things that he did for them, kind acts of deeds and things that he did. Andersonville was built to house the overload of Cahaba, and Andersonville is located in Americus, Georgia. It was designed to hold about 8,000 or 10,000 prisoners, but at the time of this photograph, which is August the 17th of 1864, population is 32,443, with 114 dying just on that day. And there was an average of 100 dying every day in that particular month. Just a little bit about the condition they were in. As told in the Chester Berry book, Epinetus Washington McIntosh, now these are his postcards here. He would sell those for 25 cents after he got home and tell these stories or sing his song that he wrote while he was at Andersonville. But he said he weighed 80 pounds when he was on the Sultana and had weighed 175. Commodore Smith said he weighed 96 pounds. William Peacock noted that he weighed 91 pounds, and he had weighed a hefty 189. So that, to me, is important to note the condition they were in when they were on board the Sultana. They were not just your normal passengers headed anywhere.
John Kaufman enlisted as a private in Co. K. 102nd Ohio Volunteer Infantry on August 15, 1862, at the age of 18. On September 24, 1864, while the regiment was stationed in Decatur, Alabama, he was ordered to join a relief expedition sent to relieve the Union garrison at featuring Henderson in Athens, Al, which was under attack. While the relief detachment was fighting to gain the fort, it was suddenly and unexpectedly surrendered by its commander. Private Kaufman was captured and sent to Cahaba Prison near Selma, Al. According to a letter he wrote to his mother from a hospital near Camp Fisk on April 17, 1865, he arrived in Vicksburg on April 15, 1865. He tells his mother that a lot of sick were leaving the next day on a hospital boat and he might be one of the lucky ones to leave for home the next day. However, we know that he boarded the Sultana on April 24, and fortunately, he survived the horrific boiler explosion in tumultuous Mississippi River. At only 20 years old, he survived the war between the states, Cahaba Prison, and the Sultana disaster. Young Private John Kaufman dies 4 years later and is buried in Mifflin Cemetery in Mifflin, O.
The dream.
Oh, yes, the new building.
So you saw the construction site?
Yes.
Good. We took a 1939 gymnasium. When the school across the street built their new gymnasium, there sat this historic building. So we are giving it new life.
Awesome.
We started on the renovating it last March, I believe. Construction's going well. The building is supposed to be finished in October. All of the artifacts and displays will be coming in after that. But we believe in April of 26 we will be up and running for sure.
Wonderful.
So just a little bit about the inside. We will have a research library, an education room, a gift shop. All state-of-the-art exhibits are being developed to help tell this story.
A huge thank you to Melody for the one-on-one historical tour of the museum. Be sure to check out their Facebook at Sultana Disaster Museum.